Honestly, I love the CRM data. I can totally geek out over it. It's the funnest thing to do is to plan different strategies around the data that you're getting.
Now you're making decisions based on input from people, based on research, based on data, and you're not just guessing. We've done these 3 things or these 5 things, and look what we've been able to do, how we move the needle.
You have to show your ROI for your technology, definitely. And when you want more, you have to prove that it's worth it because...
Today in the pod, we're going to speak to Claire Luoto. Claire is head of digital for Berkeley Group, and she brings a wealth of experience when it comes to real estate and how that experience is so important when it comes to the digital world. We'll be talking to Claire about the emotional risk involved in the high consideration purchase of a real estate market. Then we'll delve into a bit the importance of customer research and how that can be leveraged not just to help marketing, but also to inform product as well. And we'll also get a chance to really talk about the importance of how we get started, how we can start simple with an MVP and then layer on top of that complexity, how we begin to iterate and grow. We're excited to talk about real estate and digital. Let's get started. Claire, we're so happy to have you on the podcast today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. I'm really excited.
You know, we're excited about this episode. I don't get to talk enough about the real estate market, the real estate field, the way I'd like to. And that really, real estate has such a very unique post-click experience that I'm excited to be able to kind of dig into it because of the complexities involved. You've got, of course, the online component, but you've also got this offline component that tends to be equally as important. People want to kind of see what it is they're buying. There's a touch and feel kind of aspect to it. But jumping into what we're talking about from the digital perspective, what do you see as being kind of really the differences between that digital journey on the real estate side as opposed to maybe what people are more used to, the typical kind of e-commerce retail side of things?
I'm not much of an expert in e-commerce as a whole. It's never been my background, but I am a consumer of product, right? I go shopping. I'm definitely the customer. Amazon loves me. But it's, to your point, it's very different in that you've got the digital and you've got the physical. It's such a emotional thing moving into an apartment. You want to see it in person. And how you can bring that to life has really changed the game a lot for what I've seen in the last, how long? 20 years? 12 years? I'm aging myself. I'm a million years old. But yeah, about 12 years I've been in build-to-rent. So it's really interesting seeing how you can enhance that digital experience to make that personal connection so much more. Like, for example, video tours are really effective nowadays in converting a lead to a show and a show to a lease ultimately. So, yeah, I'd say it's a very personal journey and everyone's going to be different, right? Everyone's going to want to see that apartment in one way or the other. And most people will want to go the traditional route where they see it in person. They actually get to feel the product and get to see the view and understand the layout and know how big the bedroom is. And that's the bathroom and that's how close it is to, X, Y, and Z. So yeah, everyone's different, but I can definitely say that it's a very personal experience and the digital realm has really expanded a lot in this area.
Obviously real estate is a very high consideration purchase, right? There's just a lot more risk involved in there, both on the financial side and, as you mentioned, also on that emotional side of things. Because you're signing a lease, so you're there for X months, like you're bought in, right? If you're making a purchase, you're making a purchase, like you're getting a loan, whatever the case is. So there's a lot more just of that risk involved in that process, and I can see how trying to help people navigate that risk and kind of bring those fears down takes a lot of work, both on the digital side and the physical side. And I imagine that just adds a lot of complexity to the job of people bouncing around. Because I imagine it's very nonlinear, right? I mean, people may come in and do some research online. Maybe then they reach out to talk to a leasing agent, but then they go back to the digital space and kind of maybe answer some additional questions or kind of validate certain things. Do you see a lot of that kind of happening?
A lot of back and forth, yeah. We see a lot of people that are, I call them looky-loos. They're just looking around. They're not quite yet ready to commit. But once you get that inquiry made into the system, right? And then you've got that customer's information and they're kind of dedicated then, right? And that's when the relationship builds between the leasing associate and your customer. I kind of got lost in my train of thought, but yeah, once you got them in there, then it's really, how do you nurture them to get to that ultimate endpoint? And really, it's the first hurdle is getting them to tour, right? That's the first thing. Whether that be a virtual tour, a video tour, or an in-person tour, you just need to get them to see the product. And then once that kind of takes over, they do kind of still look at reviews. A lot of them are looking at the reviews. They do shop around, especially in the UK market. There's a lot of shopping around now because there's a lot of supply. But yeah, it's really, how do you chase them and how do you get them, once they tour, once they've seen it, then it's really, all right, you saw it for yourself. Now you got to reinforce the benefits. You got to get them little small touch points with marketing, got to get them to finally get across the finish line.
I can imagine that in itself, right, is probably its own challenge, not just because of, again, trying to make sure they feel comfortable enough to do it, but now you've also got this time commitment of like, okay, sit down, review your lease agreement, whatever the case is, make sure you feel comfortable with everything from that standpoint, just getting the paperwork done, getting things signed and executed. Now that's a whole other kind of hurdle. So I can imagine you kind of constantly having to leverage digital to kind of nudge people, all the way through that process. Is that pretty fair to say?
That's definitely fair to say. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, it's funny, you touched on it just in answering that, and that the fact that you work right now in the UK market. And of course, I know you've spent much time in the US market. Do you see a lot of differences now, having worked across a couple of different continents, in terms of how consumers are kind of making these kind of decisions, especially in the real estate front?
I was very familiar with the New York market. We also had, I worked for related companies. We had properties across the US, but the vast majority, the volume was really in the New York market. And brokers there were, such an avenue to get through. So you would do a lot of B2B marketing. In the UK, it's very different. There's a couple of main channels. One is your digital marketing, right? Your PPC, your display marketing, that sort of thing. But then you also have the main channel, and that is what they call listing portals here, or ILS portals. So the big one here is called Rightmove. There's also Zoopla. There's On the Market. There's a few others, but that's the main portal to get into the property supply, basically, when you're a consumer. So everybody goes through Rightmove, and that was a huge shift to me. I had never experienced that before. To have that be the majority, and so you're playing within the Rightmove game, basically, for fighting for that customer and trying to break through the clutter. And Rightmove is flooded with stock, so trying to get to your customers is a challenge in that little portal.
How do you think kind of dealing with that has kind of enhanced your skills, so to speak? In terms of how you're kind of going about your marketing game.
It's understanding the algorithm. Rightmove is pretty simple. It's just most recently updated, right, on the stock. So it's just trying to figure out your stock that you have and what you have photography of, and loading that and timing it accordingly. You see a lot of traffic in the morning. You see a lot of traffic on Mondays, strangely enough. You see Friday traffic as well. So people are just kind of working around the bookending the weekend, basically. So yeah, just timing it right, getting the right lead image, because they call it a thumbnail image, but getting the right one in there. So it's all a strategy game, basically. But that's just one channel. The rest of it is like, your PPC, like I was saying. So trying to understand where people are searching from. So I actually, one of my strategies recently has been kind of leveraging the insights we get from Rightmove, which is a vast database of really good insights. So leveraging those insights and then taking that and putting that to our paid search strategy, and how can we take the insights that we're getting from here and applying it elsewhere to really maximize our exposure. So yeah, these kind of like cross-channel strategies is something it was new to me moving to the UK.
Again, we think about things very much in terms of channels as marketers, right? We tend to bucket things very succinctly, but of course, the consumer doesn't. They don't bucket things. They don't think I'm using channel A versus channel B versus channel C. They don't care, right? It's just I'm making the search. I'm getting the information I need. I'm going on to the next step. Deciding whether or not I want to talk to someone. I'm deciding whether or not I want to tour. Right? They're just kind of going through the process. Channel agnostic. They could really care less about that. So you can really see, like you said, how you are able to kind of take learnings from one channel and apply them to another, because the principle is the same. The person's at the same stage, right, in the process, right? Oh, that's great to hear. Now, obviously, data is very important to you. You're able to leverage some of the data, as you mentioned, from the listing systems and kind of carry that over from an advertising standpoint. Are you also making use of data more from a customer relationship standpoint? So kind of like CRM, customer data, are you able to leverage that in your process as well? And how so?
We do. We take the demographic information that we get from our renters, more from like a generalized standpoint, like average income, that sort of thing. Not like every single person has exposed their data or anything like that, but we just use kind of general trends and insights that help us influence our marketing strategies for future properties, as well as influencing the build stages. So we tend to see customers like X, Y, and Z amenities. And so we make sure that we invest in those amenities in future builds. So you can take it from not just marketing and attracting new customers, but also like how it influences your development pipeline and your product itself. So yes, data, very rich data. We also use it from like a communication standpoint, like birthday communications and, annual, basically a life cycle series. I'm saying on an annual basis, but there's like a life cycle series. You came and you almost rented with us. You came and toured, but you didn't quite lease with us. So a year later, you obviously went somewhere else. So usually you go on a 12-month term. Where are you? Let's try to find you again and get you back here. So yeah, we use a lot of those. Honestly, I love the CRM data. I can totally geek out over it. It's the funnest thing to do is to plan different strategies around the data that you're getting and seeing the trends and stuff like that.
I can imagine. And I love how you kind of, broke that into kind of two chunks, right? So there's data that you're able to use to kind of say, how and when should I be communicating with prospects? And probably to some degree, even with, with people who have already leased with you. But then there's this whole piece of saying, what can we learn and what insights can we use to better inform the product itself? All right, how can we make sure that we're taking real, actionable insight and data from your current customers, so to speak, and leveraging that to say what is important to them and how do we use that to drive our product strategy moving forward? Have you seen where the company has really kind of leaned into that and said, hey, look, we're going to make some decisions here, not so much based on, what Joe said and the thought he had when he woke up this morning, but more based on, hey, this is what people are telling us they're interested in.
Yeah, absolutely. A common one that we're seeing, I've done a lot of competitive shopping across the various markets. And a big common one is people are asking for podcast rooms of all. How applicable. But yeah, like somebody needs a soundproof room and a lot of people are trying to get into the podcast game. And this is a really good amenity space to build for our basically our target demographic, which is, the 25 to 40-year-olds. So.
And that's great insight, right? Because I imagine, as you kind of touched on, that kind of ask from an amenity standpoint differs greatly depending on the demographic you're targeting, right? I mean, if you were targeting, for example, maybe 50, 60-year-olds, that might not be an ask, right, for them, right?
It would be different. Yeah.
So that's great insight. I love how you're using that kind of data in that way. So let's go back now. Let's split back to how you're using that data in terms of a marketing standpoint. Do you find that certain life cycle touch points are just mission critical to what you're doing that, hey, look, if we can't do anything else, here are some key touch points we want to make sure we have in our life cycle to help, again, nudge people, move them along that process?
Right. It's much like a purchase experience. So you're going to have to build your baseline customer journey from even the awareness phase where they've not yet heard about you to getting them into your website. And then once they create an inquiry, then what happens? Did they tour? Did they not tour? And then if they toured, did they lease? Did they not lease? And then chasing them and putting them into basically a journey from that point forward based on their that milestone, that kind of like decision point that they took.
And are you able to leverage the data in your CRM to help drive personalization in those touch points and those journeys the way you'd like to?
To some degree, yes. To some degree, some systems are more equipped for this than others. But yeah, you can get like rough timing that they came to visit you, what they were looking for. Are they still interested in a 2-bed versus now a 3-bed? Maybe there's been family changes. But yeah, like you can get first name, the basics, right? And even if you have the basics, that's better than nothing. You're communicating to the customer based on how they interacted with you, so you're showing them some point of reference, some context for that conversation that you're having with them.
A lot of that's going to be based on the actual infrastructure you have from a MarTech standpoint, right? Like what data are we able to capture given the systems that we have, given what their capabilities and, sometimes their limitations are. And again, over the course of your career, I know you've worked with kind of both ends of the spectrum, right? Very robust systems, robust MarTech platforms that have a whole lot of capabilities. And then maybe those that are a little bit simpler, maybe not quite as mature from a digital experience standpoint, that aren't able to do as much. How have you found a way to kind of balance that, where maybe you don't have the full tool belt you'd like to have in terms of being able to drive that experience?
Always comes back to your MVP. What do you need to get done, right? What makes you operational? And even the C-class product out there for CRMs, even worse than that, even D, whatever, F, as my father would say, D minus, he'd always grade something if he didn't like dinner, D minus. I digress. But no, in anything, you can get a baseline, the basics of what you need to convey. Did they tour? Did they not tour? Let's send a communication journey based on that. A not tour lost lead versus a toured lost lead. They at least saw the product in this one. They didn't see the product at all. So our goal is to get them back to at least tour this time around. And so you can at least communicate to them on the bare minimum, and that makes you operational. And when you're a small business, right, and you're just starting, you don't need the A class yet. You just need to get something that's operational and get your business live, and then get the volume that you need to get the B and the A classes. And then you can really target it. Then it can be like multi-channel, and then the really exciting stuff comes into play. But just get yourself operational. And you can do that with anything.
I 100% agree with that philosophy. It's something that we tell our clients all the time. It's like you're making this too complicated to get started.
Exactly.
And when you add that much complexity, like you don't end up actually getting started. Because it's like never done.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I love, and you said it yourself, I love that MVP mentality, right? That lean thinking of just saying like, what's the foundation here? And then we can always build on top of that, right? We can always iterate on top of that.
Exactly.
To be able to get to where we eventually want to get to, but we've got to have a starting point. And the great thing about that, again, in line with lean thinking, is once you get a starting point, now you're starting to learn, right? Now you're making decisions based on input from people, based on research, based on data, and you're not just guessing into complexity, right? Which is obviously more dangerous because now you spent all this time and money building this big behemoth of a thing, and it fails terribly because that's not what people wanted. But the time and money is spent, right? And maybe now you're not able to back out of that because maybe now senior leadership is just like, well, I just gave you all this time and money and I got nothing for it. So why do you want more, right? So it can be dangerous to do that. So that kind of makes me think, when we talk to our clients about doing that, one of the things that we try to do, especially when maybe their technology is limited, is saying, hey, look, instead of investing at this point in greater technology and more robust technology, let's kind of maximize what you have, right? And let's tell a story based on what you have of saying, look, we've done these 3 things or these 5 things, and look what we've been able to do, how we move the needle. And now you have a basis to go back to senior leadership and say, all right, now I'm going to ask for more investment. And now I have kind of a pattern to use and say, I have this track record of having done this with the investment you've already given me. Now, is that justification to now say, okay, I can give you more to play with, and let's kind of see what you do with that. Have you found that to be successful in your career?
Absolutely. Yeah. You have to show your ROI for your technology. Definitely. And when you want more, you have to prove that it's worth it because you did this and that the last time. And this is how much you invested in it. And here's the return on that investment. Yeah, absolutely. I'm very good at PowerPoint presentations now.
Oh, I bet.
I'm a whiz at PowerPoint.
How important of a skill do you think that is for marketers to develop, to be able to speak to the importance of ROI, especially when it comes from a technical standpoint?
I think it's absolutely critical. I think it's one of the biggest challenges I have in getting each and every one of my CRM stacks that I've ever had to get me the output I need. So you have a campaign, but I'm not just talking to campaign. I'm not just saying like paid search. I'm saying your 10-mile radius key area campaign versus your pet-friendly campaign. You're going to run a lot of campaigns out there within one realm, right? You got display, you got PPC, you got paid social, and there's different channels and different campaigns that you're running within each. And you need to make sure that you're putting a lot of money into these campaigns. You need to make sure which ones are actually driving leads, and then tours, and then leases. And this is one part where I feel like the moving here from the US market to the UK market, the focus has always been on leads. But if they're not quality leads, you're spending a lot of money for nothing. You need to get actual leases at the end of the day. And so which one of those campaigns are actually driving tours at the very least, but then leases as the ultimate goal? And a lot of times you're going to see they result in nothing, but you did do a lot of brand awareness, and then your SEO strategy or your SEO trends have gone upward because of those brand awareness campaigns. So yeah, it's I think it's critical to actually track your sources properly down to the nitty-gritty detail. Report on it at a macro level. You can be like, yes, paid search to the senior stakeholders brought us X, Y, and Z leads, leases, and shows last month. But you yourself need to know which campaigns are better, because then you can go to the digital agency and say, look, we spent so much money and we got absolutely no tours out of this one. Let's shift gears. What else can we do?
And as you have those conversations, right, as you're trying to work with your agency, your internal resources, whatever the case may be, to make sure that you're driving quality, how much time and effort do you feel like you're spending on that post-click to say, okay, now someone's clicked on our ad, or maybe even they kind of delved into a particular listing. They're now coming to our experience and saying, all right, I want to get enough information here to decide, do I want to tour, right? Do I want to reach out? Do I want some time to tour? How much time do you spend discerning what that right information is? You mentioned it earlier, right? The importance of maybe having, the right imagery, maybe having like 360 tours. Like, how critical is that piece of it for the person who's prospectively looking at your properties?
It's very critical. You need to know where in the journey you're getting blocked, and you're not getting those inquiries that you're looking for. So we do a lot of heat mapping on the website to see how it's performing. We do a lot of pre-qualification to the lead, right? A lot of times we would do like a paid search campaign to, let's say, a 3-mile radius within the search area that we were finding some traffic come from, but we were rendering like no good leads from it. So we needed to start to pre-qualify them a little bit. So we started serving up more listings to get the pricing out there so they'd see the price before inquiring, because oftentimes, they didn't have the right budget for us. So yeah, it's not just trial and error. You have to be quite methodical about what you're putting out there. A lot of A/B testing, that sort of thing. So open rates, we're always out looking at open rates, and we're looking at our click-through rates, and we're trying different messaging strategies, trying different imagery. We found out that the UK, this is another thing about the UK market, and I did notice this in the US, but it was towards the kind of end of my life there. But people want to see the actual apartment. They don't want to see a staged home that's similar to the apartment. And that's, even if it's like a undressed or unfurnished, I would say naked, but that's a weird term. But, even if it's an unfurnished image, that's the apartment they're actually getting, and that's what they want to see in the listings. And so testing that and finding that out was really good for us too, just to kind of tailor to what the customer needs so that we're actually creating that bridge to inquire.
And I love the fact that you're leveraging testing, right? That you're leveraging experimentation. That's kind of one of the things I get on my soapbox about, is the importance of having an experimentation program in place and leveraging that as a basis by which to make decisions. Because there's a lot of changes you can make. There's a lot of places where you can spend a whole lot of money, but having that guided by experimentation and by what people are actually kind of implicitly telling you is important to them and matters to them, is so critically important. And something you said that I really want to kind of jump in on, because I really enjoyed it. It's something we've talked about in other episodes of the pod. When you're thinking about the user experience, oftentimes we focus on the importance of removing friction, which is, of course, critically important. But there are key times where you want to inject friction. And I love how one of the things it sounds like you guys did was you injected friction in the process by saying, hey, we're gonna put these prices out there to pre-qualify you, because if this number scares you, then you're probably not the right person.
Exactly. We need to help our leasing staff. They're just overwhelmed otherwise. They get flooded with inquiries of people that will never be able to afford it. The same thing is in the UK market. It's very common to have the book a tour functionalities on your website. And I always proceed with caution with that. I think it's a great feature. I think it's a great tool, but I do proceed with caution. And so I try to make that customer work a little bit harder to find the book a tour, because otherwise you're just going to get another type of looky-loos, which are just the people who just want to see it, but they're wasting our agents' time. And they're wasting our agents' time basically, and they'll never be able to afford it. And then you clog up the CRM, you clog up the lead queue. It just kind of wreaks havoc. So friction's good. Some friction's good.
I love how, of course, you're doing a great job of leveraging customer research, prospect research, and that kind of data. Can you talk a little bit about how much time you're spending talking to your agents and getting input from them that's been informative to you in terms of what you're driving from a digital standpoint?
Yep, we definitely do. You talk to them about how many they had 13 tours last week, let's say, and then you just ask them how'd it go, what are they looking for, what's the feedback. A lot of times people say, well, they liked the amenity spaces, so that tells that specifically they like the on-site gym and they like the cinema screening room. That's a really bad example because that's not typically the one they usually like, but you get my point. So what we'd do is we would update that in listings. So we'd update that in, the website imagery as kind of key imagery to attract. So we definitely are working with them on those sorts of insights. We also are just asking them, you're with the boots on the ground, what are you hearing? They're identifying problems. Sometimes, for example, when you're managing your listings, the targeting between fields, you're saying this is a furnished apartment and you're trying to map to a furnished apartment in Rightmove, for example, but the mapping isn't working. There was a bug in the system, and so the mapping wasn't working. And they'll tell us that. They'll tell us that this listing is listed wrong, so we can go update and fix that. So they're so critical. They're the front end, not front end, but what do we call them? Front line. They're the front line, and the face to our company. And so we just need to always be in talks with them. Leasing and marketing sales and marketing are so intertwined. Everything we do, they're so intertwined. So we have to be communicative and have an open dialogue between both sides.
I imagine they're banging the drum quite loudly if the quality of leads is starting to go down and they're seeing that. Yeah.
Exactly. And so then we knew we had to shift things on our end. They'll also advise, can you do a couple of these listings, these 2-bed, 2-bath listings this week because, we need to get them out the door. That's our leasing goals this week. So, yep, we'll shift listings. We update the listing strategy.
Now, do you have a system? I know you've done this in the past. I don't know if it's something that, maybe from a technical standpoint, you're able to do now, but we talked about those different life cycle touch points. Do you have a system where you have touch points that are kind of working hand in hand with those leasing agents that are kind of helping them kind of keep in contact with people as they're moving through that process?
That's a really good question. You must know CRM quite well, Shamir. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So there's the touch points, right? I call them follow-ups. So there's the follow-ups to the customer that are automatically sent, if 7 days after a tour, there's an email that goes out. But there's also follow-ups and a life cycle journey that our internal staff are doing, so that there needs to be this handoff between sales to marketing, right? And so we make it clear kind of guidelines that you have this much time to try to win back your lead, and then we'll take over from there. So yeah, there's definitely touch points in the system for the team as well to know that they're on track or they're off track.
That's awesome. And that goes back to what you said earlier, right? Which is that sales and marketing dancing the same dance, right? Really, really alignment. On the show, we talk a lot about the importance of marketing, product, and IT needing to be aligned, which obviously is the case, I'm sure, in your world as well. But in particular, because of the real estate market, sales really has to play another critical role. They need to have a seat at that table as well, because again, only part of that process is happening online. Then you're handing it off to the salesperson, and they have to continue to the close to actually realize the revenue that you're trying to generate as an organization.
Yeah. And they're selling the dream that you are selling too. You know what I mean? You can market the dream. They're the ones who have to promise that dream. And so you have to be saying the same thing.
That makes complete sense. And obviously, when those things are in alignment, when everyone's singing the same song, that just makes it very easy for the person to, again, bring that fear, that uncertainty, and that doubt down to the point where they can now move forward and make a decision, right? They can move all the way through that process and feel comfortable that they can say, okay, yeah, I'm ready to sign this lease. Let's go. I'm ready to move in, right? That's super important. So from your experience, you've been in this game for a while. You've worked across now, at least 2 different continents, right? You've seen kind of different avenues and ways of attacking real estate, especially from a digital standpoint, from a customer data standpoint, right, to CRM, from a lifecycle standpoint. For those out there, those listeners that maybe are struggling to get their digital journeys to a place where they want to for uh, their real estate particular organization that they're trying to work with, kind of what advice would you give them in terms of maybe a place to focus, an important starting point, an important foundational piece that you feel like, okay, look, if you're going crazy right now trying to figure out how to deliver this modern digital experience that people are expecting, let me ground you. Here's where I think you should start.
Get ahead of ops, right? But no, I would say you don't necessarily have to know the technology right away. You do need it, right? You're going to need it early on because that's how you can launch your business. But you need to know how your business flows. You just need to know the structure of how your business will flow. You have a customer first. You need to capture that customer somewhere. You need to advertise what you're trying to market, right? You're trying to sell apartments, so you need a place to advertise those. You need to be able to capture that customer information, and then you need to be able to book tours and appointments, and then you need to be able to create leases and sign contracts, and then you need to be able to take money, right? And so just draw out the basics, which is you got a lead, know what do you do with it, right? And start from there. And those key milestones will be advertise, lead, show, lease, money transaction. And then it's maintenance, and then they're living with you. And so I would just think about all those different stages and as a customer, but that's really what it comes down to. It's not terribly complicated. There's a lot that happens in this business, a whole lot that happens in this business, and it will get chaotic. But from the starting point, that's what you got. You got some real basic structure to it, which is customer, and they need to sign a contract, they need to move in, they need to live in a house, you need to maintain that house, and then they're going to move out, and then you got to turn that apartment. So yeah, I don't know. I would just say, yeah, get ahead of ops too. That's critical. Get ahead of ops. You got to have someone who knows how the business works. But yeah, like, and don't boil the ocean. Don't ever boil the ocean. Start with the basics of what you need to get live.
No, I think that's great advice because it's funny. We've worked with companies, very, very large companies, right? I mean, over $1 billion in revenue, and they don't even have that basic process really mapped out. And you touched on it. The reason that's so critically important is because, well, first it's like, well, this is what I want people to do, right? This is the path I want them to take. These are kind of the milestones I need them to cross in order for us to be in business. And then next basic fundamental question is, okay, so like, how do I do that? Like, how and where am I going to advertise, right? Okay, now I've advertised. Now, how am I going to educate them and get them to become a lead? Okay, great. Now, how do I get them they give me their information. Now, how do I get them to actually take this tour, to show up and take a tour, right? So these, like you said, they sound like very basic pillars and milestones, but now you have to say, well, how do I actually do that, right? Now, okay, well, that's where the operations comes into play. And then it's like, okay, let's measure how well are we doing it? How do we do it better, right? And now you're iterating, now you're growing, now you're showing ROI for where you're investing, or maybe you're saying, hey, we tried this didn't work. I thought this would be a better way to get from lead to show. It's not. Okay, great. Let's try something else, right? So now you've got all this to play with, and that's where the complexity you spoke about begins to really pile up, right?
Everybody understands what is needed in this business. You get it. You've got apartments. You need to market them. You need people to move into them, and then you need to be able to have them move out when they're done, and then turn that apartment and do it all over again, and it repeats. That's the one thing that I've noticed also is the sales sector is so different in this regard, and they can never get their heads around. No, they can, but I tend to find myself repeating a lot of the time that this is a continuous cycle. It will always happen. There's 200 apartments that are in this building, and they're never going to be on the same schedule. So sorry, I'm making this sound more complicated than it is. It is very complicated. It is very complicated because, to your point, once you get into the details, right, of each one of those kind of milestones and how to get from one milestone to the next. But yeah, like everybody understands the basic concept of being a landlord, basically being a landlord.
No, I think you're 100% right. I mean, you're gonna get to the complexity. Like it's gonna come. It's unavoidable, right?
It's there. Yeah.
it's just going to happen. But it's like, well, but you've got to get started. You can't allow the complexity to paralyze you, right? You can't allow it to get to the point where it's like, well, it's so complicated that you're just stuck and you're not really taking any action because you're spending so much time focusing on the complexity that you're not actually doing anything. And I think
Exactly.
that's the trap that's easy to get blind into.
Just get the basics down, right? Think about the basics and then kind of go from there. Like once you kind of got your journey flow of how I can operate this business, then you can kind of say, all right, I know I needed that person. I needed that person. I needed that system. I needed that website. I need, some way to take in the maintenance inquiries. I need some way for my maintenance staff to be able to do the work orders that they're getting. I need some way for us to take the money. I need this money to map to the stakeholders, and their bank accounts. So yeah, like once you've got the foundational sketch, right, of your business workflow, the rest will come in.
Claire, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. Appreciate your insights and your experience across the industry, across the continents. And just super excited to have you today and be able to dig into real estate and tap into that experience.
Yeah, my pleasure. It was really fun. Thanks for having me.